Okay, well, thank y'all for having me here today. This is a lot of fun to get to do this. I've never done anything like this before, so just bear with me today. No. I will be talking about Carrying On the Legacy is our title for today's talk. And I'm talking about our museum's history, a little bit about our museum heritage, the story about cotton, and then carrying on our legacy today and what we do at our museum. I do like to have a theme with what I talk about, and today's theme is about sharing our stories and preserving our heritage by sharing our stories with the next generation. And so it's important that we remember. I was just talking to a gentleman yesterday, one of our visitors, and he said, we take so much for granted today, and we forget about, we take things, our chairs, our lifestyle, our culture, we forget that our children's children may not have that later and may not know about what we've gone through. And we talk about how we repeat history. History repeats itself. And so that's something to keep in mind and remember. So anyways, we'll go ahead and get started. Here we go. And I like to talk about legacy. And I looked up the definition of legacy, and it means to pass something down from one generation to the next. And also, the Latin verb for legacy is legare. And legare means to appoint or send out as ambassadors. And so that's what I want y'all to keep in your minds today, to send y'all out. When our museum first started, we had some very important people who had visions all along our path of what God has started to where we are today. And several of the people included Conway Scott Jr. here, Mr. Robert L. Dortch, even William F. Bill Foster, and several others that we may not even know of to this day, but who helped us become who we are today. Conway Scott Jr. is the one who built our general store, which houses our museum. It was built in 1912. When he built the store, he was at that time, part of a wealthy plantation home, wealthy family, and he had land holdings out in Scott, Arkansas. Well, over time, the train started crossing his land holdings, and it became Scott's Station, or Scott's Crossing is what it was called because of the Scott family and his land. As the train would go by at regular times, over time the S finally fell off, Scott's Station, and became Scott Station. Well, it ended up becoming the town of Scott today, what we know, so Conway Scott family. When Conway Scott built the general store in 1912, he did not get to stay in it or even run it. And so we're not sure why to this day. It's a gray area of why he never got to run it. There's several things that could have happened. But it did act as a general store. It was built in bricks, so it acted like a general store, a post office, a bank, a shindig, an area to just come on out and hang out. So it was a good place to hang out, a social place. After Conway Scott built it, it was also known as the Alexander Steele store, and then later on K.C. Foster's store, which a lot of folks still fondly remember and think of today. A lot of folks would have been buying pickles or crackers. They remember kids, and even Myers bread was in there, so that's something to think of. So in the picture here, which I thought was interesting, is actually Bill Cottam. Any of y'all familiar with Cottams? Okay, so it's Cottams in the city or Cottams in the country. Bill Cottam is the far right one. So that was him when he was a youngster. This is our general store, or our museum, actually right behind them. This is 1985, right before the state acquired the general store. And this is the general store museum today. Starting out with Mr. Dortch, mostly we'll be talking about his vision and what he started. His family, the Dortch family, is actually a huge part of who helped develop agriculture in Arkansas. And so in 1894, he was born here in Arkansas, and he was a plantation owner, a seed breeder. He was even a World War I vet. He had cotton gins, you name it. He had pecan orchards, dairy farms, all kinds of things. Very shrewd businessman, a great man with vision. This is Mr. Dortch when he was young in 1924. I like to put up some sayings. I had to do that today. So our deep respect for the land and its harvest is a legacy of generations of farmers who put food on our tables, preserved our landscape, and inspired us with a powerful work ethic. So going on with the Dortch family and what they helped run at that time, just a little bit, because everybody has to ask and wants to know all about Marles Gate, the plantation home down the road. This is about 2 miles out across from our museum out in the fields out there. And today, well, a little history first. It was, the inn has named after the ancestral home in Carlisle, England, and so they named it Marles Gate. It was built by Charles L. Thompson, and he also actually built 2 other homes that are mates, exact mates to this house, which a lot of folks don't realize that. They're also out there in Lone Oak and Scott area. Later on, the family unfortunately had to let go of the home, and it became a private landowner later on bought it in the early 2000s. And so to this day, it is privately owned. You can have tours, but you do have to call ahead, from what I understand. I encourage a lot of folks to at least drive around and go see it. When they come see our museum, I love to talk about the Dortch family, their legacy, and the home they left. In 1913, Dortch inherited a lot of his father's land. It was William Pinckney Dortch, which I think is a neat name. But anyways, he inherited 1,400 acres at the age of 19. My husband and I were talking about folks back then, and when you were younger, you had more responsibilities probably at that time maybe. So a lot of land was thrown on him. But what is crazy to me is that he took it on very well. In the early 1920s, they said he had up to 3,000 acres. 1938, newspaper came out, a reporter came out, and he said he had between 3,000 and 4,000 acres. So over time, we looked at his land holdings, and we believe he actually had from 5,000 to 10,000 acres he actually ran and owned. So Mr. Dortch, like I said, he started young, and he just went with it. He's a good forerunner. This is his cotton plantation. This is an old postcard of cotton plantation near Little Rock. We don't know what year this was taken, but this just shows, so actually was a photograph of some of the folks and sharecroppers working off his land. Going along with sharecroppers, for a while I've worked at the museum. I've been at the Plantation Agriculture Museum for probably a little over 4 years. And it was probably about 2 or 3 years before I actually found out where the actual sharecropper homes were. I've heard a lot about it, but never knew where they were. And if you look here, there's a Y in the photo, and that Y is where our museum is located. So the green line, or I call it the green row. Yes, go ahead.
Which way are we looking?
When we're looking, if you look, this highway here is 165. And so that's going east and west. Yeah, east and west. So we'll be looking out this way, and our museum will be right off 161 and 165 there at that Y.
So you're looking west towards Little Rock.
Yes, 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 you're right, yes, west. I had to think about that, yes. So east of our museum is the sharecroppers line. And actually, to give a better, if you know where Cottoms is, they're actually located in the sycamore trees right in front of Cottoms, along in that field out there. So that may give you a better idea. They said they called it the green line because every home was painted green. He painted his sharecroppers' homes green. That's what I know. Moving on to other things that he ran and owned is the dairy farm. They said he was a huge dairy farmer. These are his Guernsey cow, 1 Guernsey cows. And he had, in 1916, he had 2 milk cows, 18 in 1923, and 80 by the time the local newspaper reporter came out in 1938. This one I just had to throw in there. I thought this was cool. Mr. Dortch later on, again, he's such a smart guy. As he aged and got older, he realized that he could be running some train rides out there and profit by it, but also just having fun with it. He just wanted to get folks out there. And so he took the train depot. This is possibly part of theirs, but they're not sure who this belonged to exactly, the train depot. But anyways, this was his steam train here, and they would run those out in the fields. They said that bandits would be chasing the train. They might have a meal on the train on the way out and a couple miles out, and then have a ride back to the store or the museum. So to this day, we actually still have folks, literally just a couple months ago, an older gentleman walked in and said, I remember as a kid, riding on these trains. I say older folks, and just older than me. All right, so getting to different buildings that we have on our property. Our museum has about 14 acres. We are a state park, and we actually own part of Mr. Dortch's property that he had at that time. This is a cotton gin that was part of his. Mr. Dortch was growing a huge expanding seed operation at that time. So he had all kinds of buildings. He had gins, like I said earlier, the dairy cows, all that. So this was part of that. When we found this is actually a photo of in the 1990s that was taken. The story goes that a lot of the Dortch family had moved off after Mr. Dortch had passed away. And one of the daughters came back and moved back to Arkansas, and this is what she found, the cotton gin in this kind of shape. She said that they were in a big hurry, and I don't understand everything that was going on, but anyways, we had 2 weeks to get the cotton gin pulled down and brought out to our museum. So I'm about to show some videos of the help that we had to get this cotton gin brought out. This is before I started. This is, I believe, in the early 1990s, and we'll have more photos about it. With the Amendment 75 1/8-cent tax, I love to stamp that in your brains and think about that because that is coming up. But that helped us actually put together the cotton gin to what it is today. So here's our cotton gin. I believe this and actually the seed warehouse were what that 1/8-cent tax was helped put back together. Otherwise, we would have no resources to actually restore these buildings. So this helped us a great deal to reveal to the public and show them what we have. A cotton gin, at that time, this old cotton gin here would have ran 1 to 2 bales an hour. Today, we run about a bale every 2 minutes. So much faster today. His original cotton gin here, we'll talk a little more about it as we go along, was located at Bearskin Lake. And I believe, I'm not going to touch it, but right here is located. How the story goes is that when Randy, our curator, and several of our museum staff went out there to find the cotton gin that we had to tear down and bring out to our museum, when we went out there, no one knew that it even existed. Mr. Dortch and his family somehow let folks know that it had been scrapped. It was legend that it had already been taken during the war and that it didn't exist anymore. And we call this the Bearskin Lake gin. Well, Randy and them drive out there down the dirt roads to get out there, and one of the farmers is with them, and this farmer is their best friend, the Dortch's family's best friend, and he's like, I didn't know this existed. They go out to the very front part in here, and it was hidden by the oxbow lake that surrounded it, Bearskin Lake. So no one knew about it. It was hidden behind thick brush, and it was even gated to the front opening there to the lake. So there's no way to get to this gin except for one way, and no one knew about it. So it's like a hidden treasure, and that's what I call our museum too. Anyway, so we'll keep going. So that when they did go out there, this is what they found. Pretty rough. This is also has the lint cleaners. We have these to this day, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but those are sitting outside. The one on the far left, that lint cleaner down there, or cotton delinters, that one they said didn't make it. Here's another one. This is the inside of the cotton gin. And it looks a lot like our gin today, so. The Department of Correction moved and used 25 inmates to help move the cotton gin. Randy, our curator, said that they made sure, they told them specific instructions. You keep every nail, every bolt, every screw, every piece, nothing gets thrown away. Every piece of wood. So they were tearing it down from top to bottom, trying to get these items out. The bottom photo here is cotton gin stands on top in the baler. So finally, they got all the items brought out to our museum. We had to house it in our CMF forever. I think like 10 years or so or more. But the same folks that worked on the Titanic, I was told, who helped restore it, came out to our museum, that same company, and they started restoring and conserving some of the pieces that they could. And so they tried to prevent that aging process from continuing. This is the cotton gin. This is what we spent $500,000 on to put together this building. And so you get to see it to completion. And so we did house all that equipment from that cotton gin. It was all tore down, brought out 2 miles out to our building. We saved it. 10 years later, we were finally able to build that new building and put in the equipment. So it's pretty neat. Going on, moving on, the 1937 cotton gin and seed warehouse number 4. There are actually 2 seed warehouses that Mr. Dortch owned. And this is number 4 because you can look at the tops of it and there's 4 cupolas. That's how we remember it. So seed warehouse number 4. Well, that was his first one, and along with his cotton gin. His cotton gin, this one here, I said cotton gin because it is the second one that was built. So the first one that we just looked at was from Bearskin Lake. It was originally steam powered, then diesel. Then he decided to have a totally new operation and built the second one down the road from our museum, just 2 blocks. And that's what we're looking at now. So that was his newest. This is a seed elevator and seed warehouse number 4 again. This actually was his seed dryer and soybean dryer and soybean elevator. This is in one of the buildings right next to the seed elevator, and I get to drive by it all the time to Cottoms, but this is looking inside. I believe they're shipping out soybeans. So it shows how extensive his operations were. Again, the dryer. I thought the bottom right picture was just fun to throw in. It looks like they're having a big conference, and I don't know what was going on. I think a lot of farmers were coming out, and he was selling his goods and showing what he had. This is seed warehouse number 5. His operations were so extensive, and everyone he grew nationally renowned for his seed experiments, everything that he did. He sold Rado and cottonseed that we'll talk more about. But it was so big, he had to build a second, bigger cottonseed warehouse. And believe it or not, but before 1890, or the 1890s, we thought that we'd just throw away cottonseed. And y'all know what we use it for today. Any ideas? Do we eat it? Yes. We do eat it all the time. That's my favorite thing to talk about. I was at random rabbit trail here real quick, but I was at Bass Pro one day, and I was shopping through the camping section, my favorite area. And I would go looking around, it was Thanksgiving time, and there's this huge tub of oil. And my head's already thinking I've been working at the museum for a while, and it was yellow oil, so I go back to look at the back of the ingredients, and it was on 100% pure cottonseed oil. So they were selling it to fry our turkeys in. So that's for their turkey fryers. So we actually still eat it to this day. It's in our ice creams, it's in our cake, it's in our waffles, you name it, we're probably eating it. Don't know it. But anyways, these seed warehouses housed all those seeds, and the seeds were like money back then. It was like pure wealth sitting in a seed warehouse. And one cool story too is during the Depression, one guy said that he would take his biscuits. He worked at the cottonseed crushing mill, the crushed mills, and would sit underneath the pipes, and they'd be leaking oil, cottonseed oil, and he would take his biscuits and wipe them on the rims. And this was during the Depression time, so that was his lunch. Here's some more cool photos. This is a smaller electric cotton gin that ran at our seed warehouse. This is showing a photo of inside our seed warehouse number 5 that you can actually walk into this day as a visitor, and you can imagine on the left wall as you're walking in the warehouse, this is what it would have looked like back then. The seed warehouse I didn't mention, but is actually on the National Register, is fully restored, and we believe it's the only fully restored cottonseed warehouse open to the public in the world. So this is what you get to see. This is a seed, Rado and cottonseed. Mr. Dortch grew so big, and I'll explain why in a little bit, but he reached out to over 14 different states. Today we have 17 states that grow cotton, so he had a majority of cotton growing states using his cottonseed. And he used Cotton Belt Railroad. A neat story, or little fact, is that he would actually take a spur off the railroad to his seed warehouse. the train company would let him keep a couple train cars there, fill them up, and when he was ready, he'd call them and they'd send him off again across country. Folks said they'd ride the train from California all the way to Arkansas for vacation, and on the way here, they'd see mounds and mounds of piles of rawdon cottonseed. This is another aerial view. Here is the laboratory. Moving on to the laboratory. This is actually just down the road from us. A lot of these buildings are still there. So this is a really neat building. It's on the right. You'll see two huge lions sitting in front of it. It stands out in your mind as you're driving down this country highway. You're like, oh, okay, what's that? And it was funny because Mr. Dortch said that his wife made him do it. He never put those lions out there. His wife did it. But this was his laboratory. It was built in 1941. And in the basement, they ran seed experiments. They graded cotton, different things like that. So this is actually Dr. Humphrey in the middle, and there are not many photos of him at all because he's taking all the photos. All these aerial shots and stuff, that's actually him. So these are his photos. He was hired by Mr. Dortch in 1942, and then what's really cool, we say it's a small world, but he started working for the government of India in 1958. He is a big part of the reason why Mr. Dortch grew so big, although Mr. Dortch is already there. But he hired Dr. Humphreys from the University of Arkansas. He was working on seed breeding and then brought him out to work on his farms. We say it's a small world because guess where we're at ranked in the world? What number are we? Any ideas? We're number 3. Number 3. And who's number 2? I'm going to make y'all.
For what? For cotton production?
Which countries were the biggest producers in the world? Who's number 2?
Cotton?
Yeah.
Egypt?
Sorry. India's number 2. And then number 1 is, anybody? It's okay. China. China's number 1. India's number 2. We're number 3. And so we joke around that at that time they were struggling in India and having droughts and different things like that. And so Dr. Humphreys went over there and just changed everything, and now they're better than us. So we just thought it was funny. This is him again. And I thought this is kind of cool. I just had to throw it in here, learning. But the top photo here is, both of these photos on the right are seeds, cotton seeds. The top photo is acid-cleaned seeds. And the bottom right is delinted from the delinting machines. They're buzzing off those finer hairs. Excuse me. This is a staple of cotton here on the bottom left. A lot of folks don't realize what a staple is, but it's the length of the cotton hairs. This is just a cool thing to show that he was Mr. Dortch was part of the Arkansas Seed Growers Association, and they said his cotton was 99.5% pure. So he was almost to 100, but pure Rawdon cottonseed. Rawdo stood for Robert L. Dortch, or Robert L. Dortch, yeah, Robert L. Dortch, Rawdo, and then Rowden was from the Rowden brothers, who first started the strand in Texas. This is just a quick definition. Arkansas Rowden, big bowl, medium staple. This variety originated from a single plant selection made by J.O. Ware, Fayetteville, Arkansas, in a field of Rowden Brothers Rowden, grown near Scott, Arkansas in 1921. The variety was later turned over to R.L. Dortch for multiplication and seed sale. It has much vigor and yields better than many other varieties when grown under poor conditions. And I just thought I'd throw this in, talking about the story of cotton. This is the second point, and it's kind of thrown in the middle of the history. But it takes about 140 days to grow from seed to full bowl that's starting to pop open. And I thought we could pass around some cotton. I also have 2 different stems of cotton here, and there are actually 3 different stages of cotton. And it originally will have a cream flower, 24 hours a pink flower, and then after 24 hours it turns red and withers and falls off. So a 3-day stage before it turns into a bowl, which is this big thing right here, and this would be underneath that flower and helping pollinate it. and reproduce. And if I were to take one of these,
So they're flowering right now at your garden?
yeah,
Perfectly?
these are from our garden,
That's
yes.
awesome.
And Clay will come back and pick up your cotton in just a minute here, so hold on. If I cut this open, if I can get it open, I might need somebody's knife. Y'all got a knife?
Yeah, you
Yeah, I knew it. I knew Daniel would have a knife.
Did you get it?
I think you can give that a little better than that.
You trading? You're just trying to get that open?
Mm-hmm.
Pry this.
Yeah.
Oh, it's still pretty
And it
green.
can be halved if you need to.
Look at
Yay. All right, so I'm about to pass around a bowl that is still growing and forming. But inside the bowl, they've counted the hairs, and literally, they say there's 500,000 individual strands inside a cotton. It's just a random fact, but I thought it was cool. This is weird. So I get folks that come in, and they know so much more than I do. They've grown up with this cotton. This was their life. This one lady told me, she said that they were so hungry. I guess they were hungry, I'm assuming, but she said they eat the cotton and literally eat this, and I tasted it. It's really gross. It does taste a little sweet, and they do call it a fruit because it has seeds in it. But anyways, another interesting thing is one day I had a lady come in our museum, and I learned from our visitors a lot because I'm a younger generation. Anyways, so these visitors come in, and one lady starts taking all these cotton seeds, dried cotton seeds from our cotton here. She starts popping in her mouth and cracking them open like sunflower seeds, and she's eating them. And it was just like my mouth kind of just dropped open. I couldn't say anything. I just watched her. And she's like, oh, yeah. She said, I grew up in the cotton fields, and I would sit under the rows of cotton as a child, and I would just eat cotton seeds all day long. I was like, oh, okay. You know, they are trying to advertise, you know, they're still continually talking about working on these cotton seeds that we can eat one day. But back then, they actually had a thing in them we called it the Black Gospel, but it was called Black Gossipole. And that was the poison inside the cotton seeds. So I was like, anyways, the lady was very healthy. So, very healthy lady. So, who knows? But, all right. So that's the stages of cotton. So a little bit of story about cotton there. If you do want to see it, we do grow it, like he said, in our cotton patch. Always come out and visit us. I just had to throw this in again. This is from their nurseries back then, but any of y'all familiar with the Rust Brothers cotton pickers? Okay, are you familiar? Okay. Well, I just had to throw that in there. There's a story about Mr. Rust. They said he had a dream, and at that time they were struggling with all the cotton picker tractors. The spindles would wrap into the cotton, but the cotton would wrap around the spindles and not come off. It got stuck and would knot up. So supposedly he had a dream, and he realized in his dream that he could take a smooth nail to some hair and wet it a little bit, and the hair would stick, but pull right off when they needed it to. And so we have one of the Rust Brothers cotton pickers at our museum, and you can see all the smooth spindles. And so they would take misting pads, mist the cotton before the spindles would swirl through it, and then pull it right off, nice and easy, and throw it in its basket. So after his discovery, it became a huge deal. They said he gave a license to Alice Chalmers. I hope I'm saying that right. Yes. Okay, Alice Chalmers. And then later on, they said 50 farmers were bound and determined to have Rust Brothers in Arkansas in this area. So 50 farmers gave $1,000 each. So it's $50,000 to get started in the Ben Pearson factory. And Ben Pearson was known for manufacturing bows. So in that factory in Pine Bluff, they created Rust Brother cotton pickers for our area. I thought that was cool.
I'm sorry, I forgot. I missed the year.
I don't remember.
Sorry.
I know. 1930s. He was working on it in the 1930s. It came out in 1931, I think, and he kept making improvements. So I do know. 1940. So that does bring up a big point, and I won't talk about it again. But people got tractored off the land. So when these cotton pickers started coming, it was forcing people off property. So that's kind of a sad part of it, but a good part because it was ending a debt system of slavery. And so it was hard, but it was good. And what's funny, or I think is interesting, is the government was working on so many different programs to try to help farmers. And what ended up helping them the most was moving them off and forcing them to leave sharecropping system and take up their own lives. So these are just more experiment farms and nurseries. If I move too fast, just let me know. He worked on everything from oats to rice to corn, you name it, soybeans, he was on it. Mr. Dortch was a man that changed with his times. And we're about finished on this point, but I love this photo. They're working on corn, and it is huge. They're experimenting with it, and that is some ginormous corn. Going back to our museum and kind of wrapping it back up, talking about how our museum got started. Well, what happened, this is an old postcard, and Mr. Dortch is actually in the very back, right, with his daughter, Floride. But as he got older, like I said, he was a man that changed with his times. They said he survived the droughts, the flood in 1927. He got through the boll weevil, even the world wars. He was there through it all. He had his farming operation, and it continued to prosper. Well, it got to a point where cotton prices were declining. Soybeans and corn were starting to pick up, and he quickly grabbed onto that, latched onto that, and started selling corn and soybeans and working on that. Supposedly, I don't know how true this is, but folks would give him a hard time about it. And he's like, I'm changing, changing with the times. And so it also became a fish food factory, the seed warehouse. It became a window factory, you name it. He was staying with it. He was a very shrewd businessman. Well, as he aged, in the late 60s, he bought the general store from the Fosters and turned it into a museum. He called it the Plantation Museum. They did a key club, he and his daughter Floride, and I believe maybe some other of his children also were involved. But I got this museum started up. Folks were donating like crazy right and left, and most of the donated items that you would see here would be local farmers. Mr. Dortch, to wrap this back around again, he had a vision for the future. He saw that this was disappearing and that we were taking it for granted, and that he wanted to save it for the next generation. So he turned it into a museum. Here's another interior view. And this is just a cool piece, a newspaper article of Mr. Dortch and Floride and their dreams of what the museum would turn into. They dreamed of having schoolhouses on the property, bringing out the train depot, all kinds of different things, talk about the history of the area and the people and the culture. This is his daughter, Floride, in the bottom right. I had to throw that in there, too. She has such a noble look to her. She has this, just the way she looks. So this is what ended up happening. Mr. Dortch passed away in 1972. And you would think that the dream would be lost, the vision would be lost. His daughter, it got to be too much work for her, from what I understand, and couldn't take care of it. Well, the museum roof started kind of falling in. It was falling to vandalism, and the locals in the area were upset after he passed away, and they're like, we've got to do something about this. So from what I understand is Bill Foster, one of our representatives for the state, got it pushed through to Bill Clinton, the governor at the time, and said, we've got to buy this property for the state and turn this back into what Mr. Dortch had originally planned it for. And so this is what it looked like in 1989 or 1990, and you're about to see what it does look like later. But humanity's legacy of stories and storytelling is the most precious we have. All wisdom is in our stories and songs. A story is how we construct our experiences. At the very simplest, it can be he or she was born, lived, died. Probably that is the template of our stories, beginning, middle, and end. This structure is in our minds. So this is what it looks like today. The state took over, and here's a couple aerial views. We don't own all his structures from that time period, but you can still see them to this day. So has the legacy disappeared? Do you think that we're getting young people and folks coming through? Let's see. Well, we'll see in a minute. Here's a plaque dedicated to what we did. The Plantation Agriculture Museum is dedicated to the people of Arkansas and it's established to preserve our state's cotton agricultural history. The museum's existence is a tribute to Representative W.F. Bill Foster, whose interest and perseverance turned it into a reality. So his perseverance and his interest. Here's our mule barn, kitchen, plows, exhibits. Here's our cotton patch we planted May 36th. This year we planted it May 42nd. Y'all ever heard the saying, no good farmer's worth his salt if he plants after May? Anyways, here are some more buildings that we've restored. Here's inside the cotton gin today. And carrying on the legacy, now I can say it. Are we carrying the legacy on today? What do y'all think? Looking at these photos, I think so. We got school days now, we got huge groups. We could bring about 800 kids out every year and talk to them about the museum's legacy, the plantation life and plantation culture. We do Civil War reenactments, we did one year. We have our tractor shows every year, annual tractor show. I think the year after next will be our 25th. And here's our Home Goods Day. We just revamped it. It was Homespun Day, and we turned it into Home Goods Day and had a really good crowd. And the folks in the middle here won a pie contest. So to leave you with this thought, I appoint you as ambassadors to go out and leave a legacy. If you have children or friends or family that you want to share your stories with that you might take for granted, they may not later. So just remember that, keep that in mind. So we can preserve our heritage by sharing our stories with the next generation. So thank you guys. I'll take up y'all's cotton. Yes, I'm sorry, questions?
Do you know if the Dorches sold the seed company?
They said that he still has it in his name. It's still incorporated as Dorch. There's someone is still keeping it up to this day. So it's not been sold.
They never sold it.
The buildings have been sold. There's a soybean factory that runs there, but the corporation has not. Any other question? Good question. Well, I encourage y'all to come out and visit too, so definitely. So thank y'all.
You know what that green bowl back there is? It's on the right here. The green one? They gave it to, no, like the one we split open, they gave it to Mary. She's from up north. They don't go back up there. She's like amazed by all things.
If you want a cotton boll, she can grow some seeds in our house. What? Yeah.
Not legally. Old people problem. You know what? No, listen, you know it. Bold people's, the biggest problem is backyard gardeners because they're not treated for boll weed.
Yeah. So I can grow what?
You of all people should know that.
Well, I encourage
Because y'all get special permission to grow.
Yeah, I encourage them to grow it indoors. Like,
I've never successfully grown cotton. My ground gets too wet in the spring. I got little plants, but I never got any bolts of it. And it was some of your seeds. So.
do you want to grow for some seeds?
Oh, please. I'd love to
I
try.
encourage you to grow it indoors.
Okay. Which means I can grow it now,
Yeah,
even though it's after May.
it's cool. And then, yeah, any of those dry ones has got
I
seeds
couldn't
in it.
get over, yeah, my one sign had like 10 in it.
There's like 20 to 40 seeds in the bowl.
Cool. I've never played with a real cotton.
We've got some in the classroom, guys. We've got some of her cotton in my classroom. And cotton cards.
Why are you a hater?
I am good.
Thank you. I'm going to try and pop my excitement bubble here. Thank you so much. It was very informative and very fun.
Hold on, let's stop filming.